All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this village board meeting, this virtual village board meeting, to order on Monday, July 20, 2020, and ask if you would all please rise and join the village board in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to
the flag of the
United States of America
and to
the republic
for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Scaletta?
Here.
Trustee LaBedz?
Here.
Trustee Padovani?
Here.
Trustee Tinaglia? Trustee Canty?
Here.
Trustee Baldino?
Here.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Here.
President Hayes?
Here. Well, before we get into the formal agenda, let me just state again for the record that we are meeting virtually again tonight because we deem it not practical or prudent to return to in-person meetings just yet. Although we are planning, at least at this point, to return to in-person meetings in August with some accommodations for people who might not be able to join us in person or don't feel comfortable attending in person. So the details of that have yet to be worked out, but we will publish those as soon as possible. But for right now, tonight, we are meeting again virtually. And I do see a number of participants who have joined us virtually via Zoom. And so we will invite them to participate in public comment at the appropriate times. So let's move on then in the agenda to the first item, and that's the approval of minutes. We've got two sets to approve tonight. The first is from the committee of the whole meeting of June 15, 2020. Are there any changes or passes?
Approval.
Second.
Motion to approve by Trustee Rosenberg. The second was Trustee Schwingbeck. Any questions or comments from the board or from the audience? Seeing none. All those, well, roll call.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
Trustee Padovani?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz? Trustee LaBedz?
Sorry, my internet's acting up. Yes.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
Trustee Canty?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. And next is the village board meeting minutes from July 6, 2020. Any changes or passes?
Pass.
Move approval. Second.
All right, passed by Trustee Scaletta. Motion to approve by Trustee Canty, seconded by Trustee LaBedz. Any questions or comments from the board or from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Canty?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Padovani?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. Moving on to the approval of accounts payable, I would call on Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. I'd move approval of the warrant register with a check date of July 15th, 2020 in the amount of $1,210,561.63.
Second.
All right, motion by Trustee Rosenberg, second by Trustee Scaletta. Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
Trustee Canty?
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Padovani?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. Well, there being no recognitions or presentations this evening, we'll move on to public hearings. And we do have a public hearing tonight on the 2020/2024 consolidated plan, including the 2020 annual action plan and the community development block grant or CDBG budget. And so I would need a motion to open the public hearing.
So move.
Second.
Second.
A motion by trustee LaBedz, seconded by trustee Rosenberg. Roll call.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes, so we are in the public hearing, and I would call on the village manager, Mr. Recklaus.
I'm going to let Mr. Perkins, our Director of Planning and Community Development, take this one.
Okay, Charles?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. This is the second public hearing on the Community Development Block Grant. The Village Board held a public hearing earlier, and then this particular consolidated plan and the budget went on a 30-day public comment period. And the second public hearing is to allow additional public input before later in the agenda, and the report of the village manager would be the opportunity for the board, after input and making any changes, to recommend approval of the consolidated plan and the budget, to allow that to be submitted to Cook County for the Department of Housing and Urban Development's 45-day review period. So this goes to Cook County because Arlington Heights is part of the Cook County Home Consortium. We did receive a few public comments during the 30-day public comment period, mostly from nonprofit agencies requesting additional funds due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And HUD has relaxed their restrictions on public service activities. So public service activities can exceed the 15% cap. So normally the maximum would be $44,300 that could be allocated out of the $380,000 budget to public services, but there is no limit this time. The caveat is any additional funds have to be used only for COVID-19 needs. So we have recommended an increase in that budget amount from $44,300 to $81,450, and that includes additional funding for several agencies, as well as a $25,000 COVID-19 budget item that could be used for different nonprofit agencies, depending upon need after review by staff and the Housing Commission. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Nora Boyer is also on the Zoom call, Zoom meeting, and can answer questions as well. But this is really an opportunity for additional input from the public, and then for decisions to be made by the village board.
All right, thank you, Charles. If nothing further from staff, let me see if there's anyone in the audience who wishes to address the board on the consolidated plan and the community development block grant budget. And I'm seeing no hands at this point. So let me go back to the board for questions or comments. And just procedurally, I understand we'll be voting on this formally under the report of the village manager. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so no, we don't need a motion right now, but we do provide an opportunity for any further questions or comments from the board. So before we close the public hearing, I'll ask one more time, anything from the board on this item? Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. I spoke earlier with Manager Recklaus earlier today. Given that we have an unusual opportunity to have additional money for public services, and after reviewing what were some of the comments from the nonprofits during the 30-day period, I was interested in knowing about the opportunity of reallocating what we were going to do to infrastructure to more towards public services, given that I have some concerns that the need is going to remain great. It looks like individuals who are on unemployment will soon lose the additional $600. I'm concerned because I believe the moratorium on evictions is coming up, and we may see more need that would be through public service. So that was something I would ask if we discussed and what the opportunities would be.
Right. Any response to that, Charles or Nora or Randy?
Yes, I can comment on that, Mayor. So there is, in the proposed budget, $150,000 towards public infrastructure. So that is to redo streets in designated neighborhoods that qualify under the HUD criteria as income limited or income restricted neighborhoods. So the village board could reallocate some of that 150,000 if they so choose to the COVID-19 public service category that I referenced earlier that right now is proposed for $25,000. I'd suggest not trying to divvy it up amongst every individual nonprofit right now. I think that would be very difficult, but it could go into that overall category, and then staff could review requests from the agencies for additional funding beyond what the initial proposal to each of them would be. That would result in the village's general fund and capital improvement fund having to pick up the difference to pay for those road improvements that were planned for this upcoming year.
Okay, thank you. Because even if a portion of that could be used to help some of the nonprofits, I mean, that would be something I would be interested in. Just one of 9, so I don't know how others would approach it.
Well, my only concern would be, as Charles just indicated, that we would have to make up that money that's reallocated from the general fund. And so I prefer not to do that if we didn't have to. Trustee Scaletta?
So I don't see Tom Keeney on here, so I'm going to throw it at you, Charles, and possibly Randy. Is there funding in the budget that could be absorbed by us making this cut?
It would have to come out of the fund balance. As we've discussed at previous meetings, you know, we're anticipating running between a $4 and $5 million deficit in the 2020 budget year due to revenue loss. So it would have to come out one of those 2 fund balances.
So you would have to come out of the reserves?
Yes.
Okay, because I don't think that was Trustee LaBetz's intention, is that we dip into reserves. But let me ask you this: don't we have something in the budget for unforeseeable costs?
We do. We do have a contingency that we have built into the budget of about $200,000, but given the COVID-19 issues and the issues with the economy, we've gone through that, and you know, that money's already gone. Like I said, that would be the first money we would spend before we dipped into the reserves, and we're going to be dipping into the reserves to the tune of $4 or $5 million this year, as anticipated at this point, based on the challenges.
Okay.
All right, further questions from the board? Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. So Randy, hasn't there been a reallocation of some of the funds for the Health and Human Services Department to the extent of supplementing the demands that they have had to deal with for help for homeless people and other aid and things of that nature already, that we've supplemented that?
The federal government gave an additional allocation of, I think, $164,000, if that's right, Charles, to us based on a formula. And what we had programmed that towards our counseling subsidy program and additional funding to our emergency assistance program that provides mortgage and rent relief to individuals that have lost their job or have become disabled or experienced some other sort of sudden loss. Typically, we spend about $45,000 in a year out of that program. Since March, we've spent about $65,000. We are anticipating that we'll get more requests for assistance as the eviction moratorium ends this month, and as that extra $600 of unemployment is reduced. And so we think we will be going through at least a good chunk of that money. And certainly we'll go through it more if there's another resurgence of COVID requiring businesses to close further than they are. But right now, there does appear to be adequate funding in there with that additional $164,000. But it's anyone's guess what's going to happen.
Have we, do you know what the status is there? Have we gone through most of that, or?
We've spent we haven't had to touch it yet. Like I said, we typically spend about $45,000 in a given year, and we've spent about $65,000 in the last 3.5 months. So, we anticipate we're going to be way over budget in that line item, and we're going to have to tap into that additional 165. We're not on pace to take up all of it, especially if we see a recovery. But if we continue to see a downturn or additional closures, we will likely, come close to that amount.
Is any of that going toward any kind of PPE type equipment or anything, or that's separate?
No, that's separate. That we're covering through other means. This is all towards the general assistance program, and then counseling subsidy. Because of everything that's going on, we want to anticipate. I think we put $15,000 in that category. Is that correct, Charles? Counseling subsidy.
It's either 15 or 30. I don't remember the exact number. That CDBG COVID fund has been submitted to HUD, and we're waiting for their review and approval of that plan.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And any other questions from the board? All right. Let me just go back to the audience one more time. Any other questions from the audience as part of the public hearing? I'm seeing none. Anything further from staff? Trustee Scaletta.
Is this the appropriate time to close the public hearing, to make a motion to close the public hearing?
Yeah, I think so. Please do so.
I would move to close the public hearing.
Second.
And motion to close by Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee Baldino. Roll call.
Trustee Scaletta.
Here.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Yes.
Trustee Canty.
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz.
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck.
Yes.
Trustee Baldino.
Yes.
Trustee Padovani.
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes, and again, we will consider a motion to regarding this item later on in the agenda under the report of the village manager. So we'll move on then to citizens to be heard. And we do have at least one comment submitted in advance under citizens to be heard. Becky, do you want to read that in the record?
Yes, Mayor. There's actually 2 items.
Okay.
One comes from Matthew Cohen. He writes, on June 29th, I came to the village with concern over loud music affecting residents that occupy the Metro Lofts building in downtown. Following that meeting, I was invited to attend a conference call between residents and businesses to amicably discuss how to troubleshoot this issue. Thank you for your timely attention to this matter. During the meeting, residents were encouraged to continue to work with the businesses directly. The businesses on the call were Hey Nani, Coco and Blue, and the Piano Bar. I've made 3 calls to Coco and Blue asking them to turn down their outside music. Each time they respond politely and made the adjustments. However, I do not believe this to be a long-term solution without guidance from the village. I'd like to ask these businesses to move their music inside where their patrons can enjoy it. This will restore the balance between business needs and residential needs. Thank you for your attention to this matter, Matthew Cohen. The second letter is on a different topic, Mayor. So if you want me to read that next, I can, or I can pause for a moment.
Why don't you read the other one too?
Okay. The second letter comes from Laura Cook. Recently, we have all heard a lot of negativity toward police. Sometimes, unfortunately, it has gone beyond rhetoric, and some uniformed men and women have been violently assaulted while trying to fulfill their sworn duty to serve and protect. Reportedly, the morale of officers has been impacted. How specifically has the Village of Arlington Heights shown its support for and appreciation of our police officers? And that's the end of the letters.
Thank you, Becky. Well, let me just try that last one first. Thank you for those comments. And we do very seriously support our police department, our fire department, all of our uniformed safety personnel, and not just the village board and staff from a formal perspective, but I think the residents have expressed their support for our police department in a very reflective way, and that's the peaceful and respectful manner in which they conducted protests in the last month or so. And I think that really demonstrates and reflects the appreciation that our community has for our police department, that there were no confrontations, no violence at all with respect to those protests or against our police department or individual police officers. And I think that speaks volumes about our community and how they view our police department and police officers. And I know I, as mayor, and the village board as well, support our police department 100%. And we just thank them on a daily basis for all of the great work that they do to keep us safe. And so I think that's the best way I can respond to that one. Thank you for those comments. And let me turn to Mr. Recklaus for a response to the question regarding noise emanating from al fresco.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. I was on that conference call with the gentleman, and you know, I think it was very civil and it was very productive. And I thought we made some good progress and reached some understanding. And I think you know, it's important for everyone to understand that the Arlington al fresco concept, you know, is a concept that's in response to really an economic crisis. And we're trying to allow businesses to do business in a little bit different way. And there are, you know, it is a balancing act, and we try very hard to make sure that all the different stakeholders, whether they be visitors, business owners, and residents, are heard, and you know, they understand each other's needs. The number of complaints we've gotten about noise have been relatively few. We have found that the business community has responded every time that we've shared one of those complaints. And I think that, you know, there's always going to be some fine tuning. And this is the email that we got from the gentleman just now, you know, earlier today was the first that I had heard about continued issues with Cocoa and Blue, and staff will follow up with Cocoa and Blue and talk about that issue with them and try to help resolve it. But the responses that we've received about al fresco in general have been overwhelmingly positive. We received, I think the count today was 145 emails, and almost all of them were complimentary. And so, you know, we're doing our best to, you know, keep it to be a good place to live, visit, work, and do business. And, you know, we'll continue to work with residents and business owners to make sure that's the case.
Thank you, Randy. And just to echo what you have just said, one of the indications of good government is the ability to compromise. And I'm sure that our residents and our businesses both realize that the village board is doing their best to try to come to a compromise to solve some of these issues and do what's right for everyone that's impacted in one way or another. And so we've got a responsibility to our residents for the quiet enjoyment of their homes and condos and apartments, but also to our business owners to make sure that they thrive and are successful. And so we're trying to do our best to address everyone's concerns and make sure that everyone in this wins, that there just isn't one winner, but everyone comes out in the best way possible. And so that's what we're trying to do. It's a work in progress, as the village manager just indicated, but I think we're doing our best to solve these problems as they come up, and we'll continue to do that in the days and weeks ahead. So I do see some other hands that are raised in the virtual meeting, and so we'll take those now. Let me just remind everyone that under citizens to be heard, you have 3 minutes to voice your comments to the village board on items not on the agenda. And so we'll proceed with the first individual, and I only have a phone number that the last 4 are 8960. So we will need your name before you comment. So please identify yourself if you would.
Good evening. My name is Dominique Savko. It's Sawko, and I'm a resident at 10 South Dunton Avenue, the Metro Lofts building. I would like to address the issue of the noise level at Al Fresco. Metro Lofts previously contacted the village several times regarding this issue. Unfortunately, it remains unresolved. On behalf of the residents, I would like to begin by thanking the restaurants and the business owners who have turned their music down or who have moved the music inside of their establishments. We are neighbors and we love and support the local businesses. This is part of the reason why we live here. However, there are restaurants that continue to play their music outside at a loud level, and this music spills over into the units of our building located on the west side facing Vale Avenue. This music can be heard inside the units even with the windows closed. When the trustees approved the al fresco concept, they made it clear that they wanted this to be a dining experience and not a music festival. Unfortunately, there is often loud music playing, often 5 days a week and for several hours a day. This impacts the residents in our buildings and surely feels like a music festival. I would like to give an example of an existing amendment to several ordinances which addresses music levels. On December 18th, 2017, the village passed an amendment to the Planned Unit Development Ordinances number 98-061, 99-028, and 130-032 for the Metropolis Mixed Use Development for 10 South Vale Avenue. The following condition was enacted as paragraph 2, and it reads as follows. Begin quotes. No loud music shall be permitted to spill into the streets and the neighborhood. Windows within the venue side of the establishment shall remain closed at all times during any paid admission show or any event with loud music. Additional windows within the establishment shall be closed as necessary to prevent loud music from overflowing outside of the subject unit. End quotes. There are numerous examples in the public records of the village taking a strong stance in regards to any possible loud noises within our neighborhood. We realize that there is a global pandemic. Our residents are home now more than ever. They work from home, they hang out at home, they care for their kids from home. I am asking you to please enforce the existing ordinances and conditions, an example of which I just read, and to enforce your own dining experience plans for al fresco. Please make sure that these businesses move the music events inside of their venues, and that they remove speakers from the streets and the sidewalks. Once again, we are only asking for the music to be turned down to the level where it can be enjoyed by the patrons of the establishment so that the Metro Lofts residents can enjoy their homes. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dominique. Good comments, and I think we, both myself and the village manager, addressed at least some of your questions and comments. Of course, the question of what is loud music is in the eye of the beholder. And so, it's very subjective in nature, but we are doing our best on a complaint basis to ensure that music is turned down if it does get too loud. And we are asking, and I personally asked the business owners to assist us in that regard and cooperate. And so we will continue to enforce this requirement. And I'm sure we're going to get cooperation from our businesses in the days and weeks ahead. Next is Marilyn. And Marilyn, we just need your last name as well. And you'll have to take yourself off.
Okay. I'm sorry. My name is Marilyn Smith, and I'm at 10 South Dunton in here in Arlington Heights. And you said, every time we get a complaint, we have the establishments turn the music down. Why is it our responsibility to police the establishments? Why is it reactive and not proactive on their part? We try to be good neighbors, but the venues should take it upon themselves to also be good neighbors. And we feel, the residents here feel like no one is on our side. We kind of feel like the colonists in 1776, that we have no representation. It's, they say, well, the noise level is in the ear of the beholder. But if a person can't watch TV in their own house, they can't read a book in their own house, that's too loud. And you should be, it shouldn't be incumbent on us to always complain to get the music turned down.
No, Marilyn, I agree with you 100%. And so I apologize if I misspoke. Complaints are one way that we address this issue. But as I said, I have spoken to most, if not all, of the offending business owners about this particular issue. I know Mr. Recklaus has, I know Charles Perkins has, I know many of the individual trustees have, and we are being proactive in this regard as well. And so we will continue to do that. At this point, it's not contemplated that we would mandate that any music be moved indoors, but we'll continue to work with the businesses so that the noise levels are acceptable to all concerned. We do have one other individual with the hand up, and that's Jerry Wasserman. Jerry.
Good evening, everybody. Yes, I have a comment on two issues. One, police reform, in response to, the woman calling in. Of course, we hate to hear police being harmed in any way or, a backlash in a violent way towards them in any way. But I do want to say that police reform is definitely needed on a local, state, national level, and asking questions regarding having a better understanding of how the police operate should be welcomed by the village and the police. And I think this is a continuing effort that will be going on for a while. I do have questions out to Chief Pecora, and I hope I will be hearing from him soon. I have sent him 2 emails. He hasn't responded to my questions as of yet. And I think an important component to police reform is open communication between the community and the police. And, it's a complicated, a lot of the issues are complicated, and having the education, I think helps us all, leads us in a good direction for police reform. The more education everybody has, it always makes for a better outcome. So I hope I do get a response from him. Secondly, I know the affordable housing ordinance is coming up on the agenda.
Right, Jerry, if you're going to
something to comment on now or later?
Yeah, you can save that for later if you would.
Oh, okay. I could come on. I could come back later.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to address that item in just a minute.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Just in response to your first item, I know the Chief Pecora is very responsive to public inquiries, and so I'm sure he will be responding to you in short order, and we'll make sure that he gets that word that you are awaiting responses. As I think you know, we did have a presentation by the chief and the village manager about our review of our police policies and programs, and some of the changes that we've instituted as a result of that review a couple of weeks ago. So hopefully you had a chance to view that. But education is very important, and we've got a number of ways to do that, and we'll continue to make sure that our public is informed about all that we have done and will be doing. So next is Chip Brooks. Chip.
There we go. Hello. I'm from Hainani, and I just wanted to thank the board and the staff for the help that they've given us in working on these sound issues. I just wanted to address a couple of things. The comments that I think Matthew and Dominique made about moving things inside. We would all love to be able to move things inside, but the public wants to be outside. And that's just unfortunately the way it is in this pandemic at the moment. Now we have dining inside, socially spaced, as you know, but the people want to be outside. We've been trying to sell tickets to inside concerts. People don't want to buy those tickets. They just want to be outside. So I just wanted people to know that, when we can move things inside, we'll, I think we and other businesses will be happy to do that. And then just in response to Marilyn's comments, the businesses have all done a tremendous amount to try to change the way our sound is and to reduce the volume level a great deal. You know, both we and Big Shot have substantially changed our speaker placement. We talk to our performers about it. We monitor the sound. So it may well not be perfect, but there's been a vast change in how we do things. So I'm hoping that with that, we're on the right track.
Thanks, Mr. Brooks. And again, thank you for your cooperation in this regard. Next is Wendy Dunnington.
Hi, my comment is about affordable housing, so I'll wait.
All right, thanks, Wendy. All right, are there any other members of the audience who wish to address the board on an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, then we will close the citizens to be heard. Trustee Padovani had a comment.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering if Manager Reckloss, Randy, there's somewhere there, if there can be some way to monitor or just keep an eye on the noise levels for both the restaurants and the residents. There's some valid points on both sides that I've heard tonight. For the restaurants, especially Hey Nani and Piano Bar, this is critical for their success and continued existence. Yet the people in the Metro lofts, they need to have a place to live that they can enjoy. So I'm wondering, is there some way that we could even monitor what the noise level is, maybe in the actual condo units themselves? Because maybe there's some, I don't know, some sort of an effect where the noise at street level sounds okay, yet it goes up and becomes stronger in the higher level units. I'm really curious about that.
I'm not sure Randy realizes the question was posed to him because he dropped out and got back.
Yeah, I apologize. I dropped out. I just got back on, so I didn't catch all that. My apologies.
Let me kind of phrase it or summarize it. The importance of the noise issue, both for the residents to live in their condos, but also for the restaurants to attract their customers and give them the experience the customers are looking for. That's critical to the restaurant's survival. But I'm just wondering, is there some kind of way to even measure the noise as it might be experienced by the residents at the higher levels, not just at the ground level where I've listened to it, but up higher? Maybe there's some effect, sonic or atmospheric effect, that makes it different up there that we should be aware of.
What I was going to say is, our ordinance, our noise, our nuisance ordinance, which would come into effect, as we've talked about this quite a bit at the staff level, is what constitutes a nuisance from a noise perspective. It has to be something that's consistent. It has to be something that a reasonable person would find objectionable. And in court, it's a very high bar to get there in our system. I mean, I would be happy to, myself or another staff person, if they would welcome us in to experience this from a residence, unit. I think that might be the easiest way to really just better try to understand this. But it's not something that is that is necessarily a measurement is going to be able to get us there because of the standard that is in existence under the law. Because it's not just a question of noise. It's of volume. It's a question of, under the law, of consistency and of objectability, which is somewhat subjective. But we're happy. We've met anytime that residents have asked us to meet. Anytime we've received a phone call, we've returned it. Anytime we've received an email, we've returned it to continue discussing this. And as you said, Trustee Padovani, some of the businesses, it isn't just an issue of providing ambiance for the restaurant. Their business model is dependent on providing music. And, this is something that, we're trying to allow each business to provide their what they provide to their customers. And so it is a balancing act. I mean, I've gone downtown several times and tried to listen whether it was too loud. And generally speaking, from the street level, I haven't found it too objectionable. And I think the business owners know that when we do get complaints, they get a phone call from me or from one of the staff members. And we talk about this. It isn't something that where we just tell them, not to care. We talk about it ad nauseum about what we can do specifically. And so it is something I can say we're taking very seriously. But if there's an issue with the acoustics in an individual condo, I would be happy to, myself or another staff person to visit that person's address and see exactly what they're experiencing, because sometimes that doesn't come across in a cell phone video.
I would hope that if any of the Metro Lofts folks are still here, that if they could arrange for a staff member to actually come and experience it as they are experiencing it, that would go a long way for helping everybody understand what's going on here.
Absolutely.
Right. Trustee
Thank you, Mayor.
Scaletta, did you have a question?
Thank you. Yes, similar to Trustee Padovani, I was wondering what our next steps were going to be. Also, I'm hoping that as a board, we're going to vote to continue al fresco into September. But what we need for there to be some harmony in the downtown, specifically right around the Harmony Park area and also on the Dunton side, it sounds like now. And I'm hoping that everyone can get together and make this work. And I can appreciate that's part of their business model. But our goal of creating al fresco was to create an opportunity for more people to be able to dine outside because of the COVID virus and the government mandate that you weren't allowed to have 100% occupancy inside. So while I appreciate that's their business model, we need to make sure that there is harmony in the downtown, and I'm hoping that staff can work with the residents and the businesses to create that harmony.
Trustee Baldino or Rosenberg.
Thank you. Randy, wasn't there, I believe in the past, the health department had some type of measuring devices that they were able to use to determine noise levels or sound levels? Do you know anything about that?
That may have been before my time, but like I said, the standard here is our nuisance ordinance, which isn't based on an actual decibel level. There's nothing written in our ordinance about an actual decibel level in terms that would be actionable.
Okay.
I have one other hand that's raised. I'm not sure if this is an individual who wants to make comments. Special board meeting is the name that I see. If you do, I would need your name if you would like to make comment. Is there someone there? Special board meeting. All right, since we can't make contact, I'm going to move on in the agenda and close the comment period under citizens to be heard. And I have a request to move up the consent agenda items because of the expected time it'll take to discuss the inclusionary housing ordinance and affordable housing ordinance agenda items. So can I have a motion to move up the consent agenda to this point in the agenda?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
I think Trustee Padovani, seconded by Trustee Canty. Roll call.
Trustee Padovani?
Yes.
Trustee Canty?
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. Are there any trustees who wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Any members of the audience wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? I will be voting no on consent legal A regarding the Paragon Mechanical Ordinance. Is there anyone else who'd like to vote no or pass on any item on the consent agenda? Trustee Rosenberg.
I will also vote no on consent legal A.
Any other no's or passes? All right, seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
I'm sorry. Actually, I am passing. I apologize. Pass.
Passing on which item? Same item?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I would entertain then a motion to approve.
Move approval.
Second.
Baldino, seconded by Trustee Schwingbeck. Any questions or comments from the board or from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. We will move back then to old business, and we do have two items to consider tonight. The first, again, is the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance / Affordable Housing Ordinance. Mr. Recklaus?
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, we're going to be once again discussing proposed updates for our affordable or inclusionary housing standards. As you all know, Arlington Heights is one of only 7 communities out of the entire Chicago metro area, other than Chicago, that have any inclusionary or affordable housing guidelines or standards. In recent years, the village has found that its current affordable housing standards have not been obtainable based on today's real estate market realities. For virtually every project, the village has had to negotiate a different standard with developers. This diminishes the value of our current standards as anything other than a launching off point for discussions, and also leaves an inefficient process where the board, staff, neighbors, and the Housing Commission more or less debate the overall issue of affordable housing and the role of the village in ensuring it in a general sense every time a project comes in. Back in 2019, the board directed staff to research and draft new standards and rules that both reflect the values of the village board and the community on this issue, but are also obtainable in today's marketplace. Last fall, the staff presented a report on affordable housing to both the village board and the Housing Commission. Both bodies discussed the report in September. After that, the staff refined the concepts further to reflect input from both groups and new information. Staff also solicited input in meeting attendance from the development community to gain their perspective as well. A draft housing ordinance was presented to the village board again in January, and then went before the Housing Commission in February. At that point, we were getting ready to discuss it in March, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic, that conversation was delayed. So the ordinance before you tonight reflects all of the input and guidance received to date. I should note that this presentation does not cover every aspect.
Randy, looks like we might have lost you there. While Randy's reconnecting, Charles, did you have anything to add, or Nora?
Mayor, if you'd like, I can do a screen share and kind of walk through the proposed ordinance. It's been a while since it was discussed in January.
Yeah, please do, Charles.
If you just bear with me 1 second. So Randy has touched upon the first few slides and the process that we went through. Just to kind of set the stage, the village has had an affordable housing policy or guidelines since 2008, and they've changed over the years. In 2008, they did require as much as 20% of affordable units being provided in a multifamily development and a fee in lieu of $100,000. The village never ever got anywhere close to receiving that or negotiating that on a development by development basis. Our current guidelines changed that quite a few years ago to 15% of units being provided in a development and a $75,000 fee if those units could not be provided. Again, The village never came anywhere close to receiving or negotiating that amount due to the impact that it had on a developer's pro forma and their kind of rate of return and revenue. So the proposed ordinance that we've presented and discussed on numerous occasions looks at changing that and having a hierarchy of requirements between 5 and 10%, and then setting forth some linkage fees for single family and multifamily, and keeping that fee in lieu of at $75,000 per unit if a development demonstrates sufficiently to the board that they cannot provide units within their development. In January, the board talked about a draft ordinance and made 6 recommended changes to that ordinance. The first was the removal of a requirement for independent senior living as a requirement, given the complexity of senior housing. Removal of the linkage fee that was proposed for single family additions, but maintaining it for new homes or teardowns. Modification of the multifamily linkage fee, changing it from $7,500 to $3,500 for developments of 9 or fewer units. Modification of the fee in lieu amount for sale product. Instead of being a fixed amount, regardless of the sale price, it is now on a proportional basis based on a percentage of the proposed or actual sale price. And then the section dealing with alternate contributions, that if a developer proposed purchasing a building or another site instead of providing the units within that development, that section was removed by the board. The Housing Commission, and also I should say in January, the board referred it back to the Housing Commission for additional review. And the Housing Commission made 3 specific recommendations at their February 4th meeting. The first was to reintroduce the senior housing component, but to treat it the same as for sale multifamily developments. The second was to reinstate the alternate contribution provisions that the board had preferred to eliminate, with some clarification. And then the third was to include preferences for leasing of rental units within the ordinance, and staff has proposed keeping those in the administrative guidelines for ease of implementation. I'll go very quickly through the proposed ordinance, and then I'll kind of stop my presentation just as a recap. For those not watching, the videos of the 2 committee of the whole meetings in September and January have been on our website for viewing over the time period. But the purpose of the ordinance is to encourage high quality housing for all residents, creating a mix of affordable units as well as market rate units. And the affordable units would be tied to affordability in perpetuity. The fees discussed in the proposed ordinance would be annually updated based upon the Consumer Price Index, and those would be included in the administrative guidelines each year that would be updated and distributed to developers. So the covered projects would be developments that result in new single-family homes or replacement of single-family homes, so a new home or a teardown, or new multifamily dwelling units. The proposal is for single-family units that there would be a linkage fee collected at the time of building permit of $3,500 per new single-family home or teardown. And this was studied, and the reason for the linkage fee or the justification, we took a look at 6 recent examples of homes that had been acquired for a certain price, torn down, redeveloped with a larger home, and then were placed on the market. And so you can see the area highlighted in yellow shows the previous sale price pre-teardown, and they range between $187,000 and $275,000. The homes were torn down, rebuilt with much larger homes, and the resale price listed on Zillow last year when we did this study ranged from $775,000 to almost $1 million. And these are in the time period of 2016 to 2019. Putting it in context, a 4-person family with the 80% AMI, which is area median income, could afford a approximately $200,000 home. So these homes initially were, hard to attain, but after tear down were definitely unattainable for a family of 4 with an 80% AMI. So a $3,500 fee was proposed, a modest fee. It's still, a sum of money, obviously, but it equates to about 0.35 to 0.45% on the list price of the examples that we looked at. And that would just provide ongoing seed money that would go into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, would not go into the village's general fund, and would be earmarked for future affordable housing needs in the community. Section 1707 talks about multi-family rental developments. So developments containing 9 or fewer, there would be a similar linkage fee of $3,500 per unit. This was the item that I discussed that the board changed at their committee meeting in January. And we did, in all the materials that are online, we did extensive studies on the impact of affordable units on what the developer would be basically losing in their revenue over a certain time period. So this chart, you can see the 60% AMI rental rates compared with market rate rental rates, which were taken from the proposed Arlington 425 development. Obviously the monthly loss difference, and then the annual loss difference for a studio, 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom unit. And then looking at a capitalization rate of 6.5%, the far right-hand column is what each unit of that caliber would be in lost value to a developer if they were to try to sell their development or finance their development through a lender. And that's the 6.5% came from CBRE, which is a large real estate firm in the Chicago market. And that was what they were estimating for good quality suburban residential developments during 2019. So multifamily developments, there are, the ordinance proposes 3 tiers. The first tier is for downtown in our B5 district, proposing 7.5% of the units within a development be designated as affordable. These could either be all of the 7.5% voluntarily as affordable, or as a second option, 5% would have to be affordable, including it in the development, and 2.5% could be met by providing a fee in lieu of providing those units in the amount of $25,000 per unit. This is what we were able to negotiate with Arlington 425. And if you recall, we spent many months going back and forth with the developer, getting to the point where they agreed to the 7.5% in the downtown in their project, 5% units in the development, 2.5% at the fee. Obviously, they haven't moved forward with that development yet, so it remains to be seen whether they would follow through with that. Under this scenario, if a developer demonstrated to the satisfaction of the board that they could not provide units in their development, then they would have an option of providing $75,000 per unit for 10% of the number of units within the development. The second area for multifamily developments on the rental side are all districts except for the B5. This would be proposed for 5% of the total units to be included as affordable, and then 10% or $75,000 per unit if the developer reasonably demonstrated that they could not provide those units, and that was accepted by the board. And then thirdly, the third category for rental developments would be developments that are publicly assisted, either through some sort of federal funding, through HUD or the state housing authority, or assistance through a village TIF district or something of that nature. Then the proposal is for 10% of the units to be affordable with no in-fee in lieu of option. And then there's also a multifamily for sale proposed development. The proposal is for 9 or fewer units with the linkage fee of $3,500. For 10 or more units, no actual units being provided, but provide a fee for 10% of the units based upon a percentage of 12.5% of the projected list or sale price of that unit, with an initial cap of $75,000 that would get adjusted annually based upon the CPI. So that was the change on item 3 on this slide from the board's meeting in January, to have a proportional scale instead of a flat rate, $75,000 per unit, regardless of the value of the unit. And the reason we had recommended no units be included for sale, we have had a for sale product that had units deed restricted, Timber Ridge, Timber Court, and it's been a difficult project to manage. And then when you have units that are selling perhaps at $600,000 or $700,000, you would need a unit at $200,000, and it's very difficult to implement that on a for sale product. There is a section in the proposed ordinance that deals with density bonuses, fee waivers, downtown parking offset, if parking is available, all subject to the village board's discretion. There's a section that deals with the integration of the units, that these units need to be visually comparable with the market rate units. They don't have to have granite countertops, but they do have to have contractor grade finishes. So they have to be high quality finishes, but they don't certainly have to be the upmarket add-ons that some people add into their units. And then there is a section that deals with relief. As with all ordinances, it's very difficult to draft an ordinance that covers every particular instance, every situation in the economy, every market situation. So there is a provision that allows a developer or a petitioner to seek relief from the village board. And then just in conclusion, as we've said before, it is difficult to develop a set of standards, one size fits all. And it's really unrealistic to expect that there would be no dialogue or discussion back and forth with the developer as they go through the development process. But certainly having a clearer defined policy that's attainable will help facilitate those discussions and help expedite the discussion on affordable housing and inclusionary housing. So with that, we'd recommend any additional feedback from the board, and then direction from the board regarding whether any additional changes are desired in the proposed ordinance, or whether to place this ordinance for final approval by the board. And I'll be happy to either leave this up, Mayor, or take the screen share down.
Charles, can you take it down at least temporarily? Thank you. Almost there. Mr. Recklouse, I think we've got you back now. I want to give you an opportunity to finish your comments if you had anything else to add.
No, I apologize. Bad connection here. Oh no, Mr. Perkins covered pretty much everything I wanted to say. I just was going to outline the process to date, so my apologies. My apologies.
Nora Boyer, anything to add?
Not at this time. Thank you for asking.
Thanks, Nora. I do, before I go to the board, I want to acknowledge the attendance of one of our Housing Commission members, Andrew Tripp, and see if he had anything to add. I know the Housing Commission has spent a great deal of time reviewing this proposed ordinance, and so we very much appreciate, Andrew, you and your colleagues' efforts in this regard, and so I wanted to give you an opportunity just to address the board if you had anything to add.
Not at this time, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, though, for the recognition.
Thank you for being here to answer any questions we might have. All right, I will go then to the board for questions or comments. And Trustee Schwingbeck. You're on mute, Tom.
There you go. Randy, Charles, thank you for all your hard work putting this together. My only thought is I appreciate everything that you guys have done here and the hard work. I'm glad there's still going to be some room for discussion because, Charles, as you and I talked earlier, the proof is in the pudding. And if we're seeing developers either walk away from projects or not come to our village in the first place, going to other towns and cities around us, we're going to have to monitor this closely so that we don't lose some nice opportunities that we're trying to bring into this village. So I certainly am in favor of this ordinance, but I'm just hoping as we're having discussions with these developers that that we listen to them and we don't want them walking away from projects or going somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you. So, Charles, when we're looking at when HUD is looking at 30% of someone's income going towards housing costs, does that include real estate taxes?
Nora, can you answer exactly what's included?
Yes, it does. It's the total monthly costs related to housing as a percentage of monthly income.
Okay. So, because we have quite a bit of affordable housing in town, but what's become unaffordable a lot of times is the real estate taxes. 75% of your tax bill is going to the school districts. So I guess my question is that when you have these developments that are for sale, and you are trying, we don't know what the property taxes are going to be until they're sold, correct, Charles?
Yeah, we have kind of an estimate. We can get an estimate based upon what's happening in the market for a comparable value home, but we don't know exactly for that unit until it's assessed and on the rolls and assessed by the assessor.
Okay. And so, if it's in like the downtown's a little bit more expensive than some of the other areas in town. So we then, aside from the fact that if let's say that there's 20 units in a building and there have to be affordable units in that building, and whatever the reduction is on those affordable units, I mean, the developer's not going to take a haircut. The developer is going to spread those costs amongst all the other buyers of those units. So how are we going to be able to ensure that whatever the real estate taxes are once that property is sold and they go onto the rolls, that the unit is sold as an affordable unit and doesn't go above the 30%?
So, Trustee Scaletta, that's on for sale products when we're recommending no units be included in the development, but that they pay the fee in lieu of. So Sigwalt 16 is the perfect example of that. Obviously, they have 16 units. Their initial starting prices, I think, are in the 600,000 and up. They pay, when they collect their permit, they'll be paying a fee that's $75,000 for the percentage of units that they would otherwise have been included. So we're not recommending for sale product be required to have actual affordable units for some of the reasons that you discussed.
Okay. But you are recommending it for when it comes to rental units in perpetuity.
Correct.
And so we don't want to do that because, tell us, Charles.
Well, we are recommending for rental developments that units be included in the development at a certain percentage in perpetuity. So the project that's currently under construction, Arlington Downs 2, that's 263 units. Their requirement was 9 actual units in the development. And then when they picked up their building permit last year, they paid $100,000, $25,000 per unit for 4 additional units. So their requirement was about 5%. Under this proposed ordinance, it would be a little bit higher than that. but it's pretty close. So they are including those units, those 9 units in their development. They would be rented at the 60% area median income, and then they would provide the reporting each year on those units.
Charles, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. But so why don't you want to do it on the units that are for sale?
We have 14 units that were deed restricted at Timber Court, and they have become an ongoing challenge with the owners of those units looking to try to sell. They have issues selling them. They're deed restricted, so they can't appreciate at a certain above a certain value, even though they acquired them at a reduced rate. It's just become a very complex, time-consuming situation for staff to try to manage them. In fact, many of them are now rented out because the owners can't sell them, and their situation, their job may have taken them out of state or something of that nature. So most of those units have actually gone to a rental, affordable rental. So based on that experience, we're not recommending be included at this time for sale product. Now, in 5 years' time, if the market is different and the economy changes for sale products, we could always revisit that.
And since the last time we met, have you spoken with any bankers to or any financial experts to understand their thoughts on our affordable housing component and how they approve loans?
Not specifically, but we have looked at it from a cap rates point of view. I don't mean to put Nora on the spot, but I don't know, Nora, have you had any discussions with lenders on this? I know you have on the Timber Court situation extensively.
Right. I did have some conversations with lenders on deed restricted units for sale units, which again is one of the reasons we're not recommending it at this point. There were quite a number of lenders who were willing to provide mortgages under that kind of program, and that diminished quite a bit after the recession. I have not talked to any with regard to loans on rental developments, though.
Okay. I'm supportive of us having an affordable housing component in town. And I appreciate all the work that staff and the Housing Commission, definitely Nora, have put into this. I'm just, like Trustee Schwingbeck, I'm concerned that while this is a great policy, that what I don't want it to do is get in the way of seeing development in Arlington Heights. So I would hope that you keep us apprised as time goes on, if our affordable housing policy is scaring away developers, or the developers choosing to work elsewhere where there isn't a component like this, they may see as burdensome, trying to get other potential buyers to absorb the additional fees or additional costs for their units for rental.
Any other questions or comments from the board before we go to the audience? Trustee Canty.
I just wanted to thank you, Charles and Nora, especially for all the work you've done on this effort. This is one that sits really close to my heart. I'm a little bit concerned. I think I talked about this in January when we brought it up, that linkage fee amount, Charles, for the reasons you discussed. The example that you had in your presentation, where we are seeing developers a lot of times buy our more affordable homes, tear them down, and put up homes that are closer to the $800,000 to nearly $1 million range. I'm concerned that we're going to lose a lot of stock that way. It's happening in my neighborhood, I know for sure. And so I don't know that $3,500 is enough to help us build up that trust to start trying to help undo some of the damage of that. So that's something I'd like us all to consider as we go on talking. And then I know that some members of the community have raised concerns about only requiring a 5% of actual units, particularly in the downtown. The concern being that over time, if we're only requiring 5% of units, when we need to have on the whole throughout the village 10%, right? Eventually, we're going to start running out of units, and we won't be able to keep to that 10%. And I know that in theory, on paper, we've got about 19%. But Charles, if I remember correctly, you and Nora stated at the January meeting that that's a little bit loose with the numbers to say that we're at 19% of affordable housing in the village. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, I'll ask Nora to comment on what all goes into that, and it does vary. So 5 or 6 years ago, we were at 13%, and then when they redid it, we were at 19. So Nora, can you answer what goes into that?
Sure. Yeah, the measurement is done by the Illinois Housing Development Authority using the definition of housing that they have in the state statute. And where it gets a little difficult to reflect what our actual housing stock is that when they do the calculation of housing costs, they don't include association dues. So I think a number of condos, I believe, are overcounted as affordable because they would not meet the maximum amount for affordability if you factored in the association dues. The reason that they don't include the association dues is because they are trying to apply one definition across a very large, diverse state. And so they don't have different definitions for different kinds of housing markets. So it doesn't quite reflect the situation that we have, where we have quite a number of multifamily buildings.
Sure. And I can understand that reasoning, but I think that's something that we need to keep in mind when we throw out numbers like, oh, we're way ahead of the game. There's some fluff built into that, and it is concerning, and it's something that we should keep in mind. And I also, Charles, I just want to say thank you for keeping those preferences as to renters out of the ordinance and more in the guideline. Some of those preferences were concerning for a couple different reasons, so I'm glad that they're in a place where they can be more easily changed and moved around. That's all I've got. Thank you.
All right, anybody else from the board before we go to the audience? Trustee Baldino.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I also expressed concern the last time this came before the board in the sustainability of the 5% requirement for units. We have a number of large developments that are coming, and we hope they're coming. We hope that they're successful, and we hope that they're a great thing for the village. But they're going to dilute our percentages. And there's a very real possibility over the next 10, however many years, that we're going to lose our goal of 10%. And so that was a concern that I raised. Thank you, Trustee Canty, for raising it again. And thank you also, Charles, for explaining how switching gears a little bit, how the linkage fee for teardowns was calculated. My first question may seem a little strange, but how do we determine what a teardown is? And what I mean by that, I mean, we all understand what a teardown is, but how administratively do we handle it in the village? Is that design commission? Is that the housing department? Who determines what a teardown is? And more specifically, there was concern I saw in the housing commission minutes about loopholes, where a teardown may actually be happening, but they leave the front facade, and so it's technically a renovation. And how do we address that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and we've talked about that a lot internally, and we do deal with that on projects that come before with a design commission application. And some, you're correct, some will say it's an addition and there's one wall remaining, and we've got some photographs of an example where there's just one front facade remaining, tore the house down, and it's a massive addition, and you'd never even know that wall was there. In our mind, that's a tear down. So we would define that as a tear down. So that would be, in the administrative guidelines. That would be our interpretation. And again, if somebody didn't agree with that, they could, in theory, seek relief from the village board. Okay. We heard the board at the last meeting on additions. You know, we had talked about additions of 50% or more paying that fee, and the board didn't want to do that because those are mostly, you know, Arlington Heights residents that are doing that. So clearly those are not tear downs, those are additions. But there are examples, you know, some are, you know, they completely tear it all down, and it's clearly a tear down. Others leave a little bit up, and it, you know, we kind of classify that as a tear down.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted that clarification on the record. And like I said, I do appreciate your explaining how you came up with the linkage fee. But my feeling is that that's not really helpful. And I don't mean to denigrate what you did, but you know, it's 0.3% of the list price. That doesn't take into account how much the developer paid for the original property and how much they paid to tear down and rebuild. And there may not be any way to answer my question, but on a typical tear down, what is the profit margin? And the reason I'm asking that is if the $3,500 fee is somewhere around, you know, 12% of the profit margin, then I think it's in line with what we're trying to do here and as far as a fee in lieu. If it's still 1-2%, then I agree that number might be too low. So again, I don't know if there's a way to answer this question, but that would be the information that would be more useful for me in evaluating this linkage fee.
Mr. Reckloss, did you have a comment to that?
I can't give a detailed answer to that question, but I mean, I think one thing, I've heard some feedback from realtors and folks that do tear downs. And you know, one of the things I think we need to keep in mind is it's a good thing in our community. It's a kind of a blessing and a curse that we have these kind of market tailwinds that on the one hand allow us to improve our housing stock and keep them from falling into disrepair. And I know that there's some communities in our area that would love to have some version of the tear down activity that we have, because sometimes it eliminates your worst or least valuable housing stock and keeps it from bringing down property values and so forth in the neighborhood. But on the other hand, obviously we don't want it to go out, you have, you know, an unchecked market where, you know, you're losing all your affordable housing, which is something that we've been seeing. And I think, you know, we're talking about that $3,500. We think it's a start, and we can see what that does. And, you know, like everything else, if we find that it's too high, we can make course correction. If we find that it's too low, we can always increase it in coming years as we observe the marketplace. But we think that it is a start, and it's better to kind of start at that level than to, you know, tinker with it too much, because we don't really want to eliminate that the beneficial side of this, where we are kind of, you know, getting reinvestment in our neighborhoods. And so it's very much, you know, I just want to make that point that there is a benefit to that type of investment, but as long as it isn't going unchecked, and we think that this can help mitigate it, as well as some of the rules that we already have in place in terms of preventing gigantic housing from going in that ruins the character of a neighborhood.
Thank you for making that point, because I agree with everything you just said, Manager Reckloss. And then I fall back on the $200,000 house being torn down and $1 million house being put up. From a neighborhood standpoint, that's great. You know, that if that goes up next to my house, it increases my property values. That's great. But it does exactly what you just said. It reduces our affordable housing stock, and it makes it difficult for that list of folks that we were concerned about being able to live here, being able to live here. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments for the board? Seeing none, we do have some comments that were submitted in advance. And so Becky, I'll ask you to read those into the record, and then we'll go to the audience by show of hands.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 4 letters. The first one is from Linda Wasey. Dear Arlington Heights Mayor and Board of Trustees, as a person of faith attending Southminster Presbyterian Church, I support the Affordable Housing Ordinance. I believe that offering affordable housing to the village's service and restaurant industry workers, health and essential workers in Arlington Heights is a visible sign of the town's efforts to equalize availability of new housing that all can afford. Living in the community, these workers service provides them with new quality housing and the amenities this village provides its residents. Arlington Heights needs all of these workers to keep our local economy strong. This relationship is of fundamental importance to all. However, I see that the alternative provisions have still allowed developers an opportunity to opt out. As seen in past history, the fund that collects these opt-out fees continues to grow, bypassing the village's commitment to equal housing for all, especially during current times when minorities are asking for equal opportunities in many areas. The second letter comes from Christine Organ. I am writing regarding the proposed affordable housing ordinance. While I am pleased the village board is considering an affordable housing ordinance, I urge the board to consider a 10% affordable housing inclusion rate in all new private rental developments and an affordability rate of 12.5% or greater in order to better serve the needs of our community, particularly in light of economic challenges impacted by COVID-19. Thank you for your consideration. The next letter comes from Dr. George Motto. If I weren't attending the Senior Citizens Commission meeting right now, I would be addressing you in person. Lack of Arlington Heights affordable housing persists as a major concern, as documented most recently in our AARP Age-Friendly Community Survey. This despite the voluminous work that's been done, including the new inclusionary housing ordinance, all of which I have read through and to which the unenlightened, like myself, tends to obfuscate the problem. I ask, what are the real issues? Definition, zoning, costs, other factors? What projected needs are we trying to meet? How will this new ordinance really help in the big picture? I think we need more public education, transparency, and discussion here. Also, on a similar note, what is the timetable for moving forward on your stated goals of diversity and inclusion? I think the community discussion groups that I understand are in the works are immensely exciting. With all the change going on, we need to be part of the solution, or we will continue to be part of the problem. Thank you. And the last letter comes from Lori Grainowy. I am writing in regards to the affordable housing requirements that are on the agenda to be voted on tonight. There are 3 areas that I would like to comment on in the new proposed requirements. First, Section 7-1707B, Downtown B5 District. The 7.5 affordability requirement is too low and should be pegged to the 10% guideline for inclusive units within a community. The 10% rate will help keep our community at an equitable level of affordable housing. However, if the level remains below 10%, the fee in lieu should be at least $100,000 here to encourage included units. Number 2, Section 7-1712, alternative contributions. I do not agree with reinstating the alternative contributions as recommended by the Housing Commission on February 4th. My concern is the possibility of creating affordable housing buildings and/or affordable housing neighborhoods that are separate and distinct. I realize that is not the intent of the Housing Commission, but I think it's a real possibility. Section 7-1704, covered development projects. I live in downtown Arlington Heights. While I can't quote the number, I see a number of older, smaller houses being torn down to create quite larger new buildings. This is going to affect the number of affordable houses available. I'd like to see the fee imposed to be larger than $3,500. I don't think this will deter those that want the high-priced new homes, but it will help create a fund for more affordable housing. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
All right, thanks, Becky.
Thank you.
I do have one hand that's up, and that's Zoom account. And Mr. Account, if you just identify your real name.
Hello, President Hayes. Comment on the affordable housing, if that's okay.
Keith, your name cut out, so just verify it is Keith Moons.
Okay, yes, it is.
We got you then. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just really would encourage the board to, be bold here and put forth a very inclusive affordable housing policy or ordinance, hopefully now. I think we can set an example for the rest of the area here on what a real inclusive policy ordinance looks like. I think, we've got some long ways to go here in town, and I would ask that you do what you can to make this as inclusive as possible. I think we're held back sometime, I feel, by the myth that developers are going to run away because of affordable housing. I don't think that's true necessarily. I mean, I think 425 is being held up for something other than affordable housing from what I understand. But I do agree that 5% is too low. It should be closer to 10%, for which it was discussed earlier. And tear downs just have had a devastating effect on some of our neighborhoods. I mean, you go look at Virginia Terrace and Hasbrook Park, and you can just see what tear downs do to what I would consider affordable units. People that can come into town for starter houses. One question I do have is regarding TIF districts. I understand that rental units in a TIF district are at the 10% included with no fee in lieu. The thing that I would ask that you consider is that owner-occupied units in a TIF district also be held to the same standard. I mean, a TIF district is government financed housing, and no matter what it is. I mean, we financed it, and I think if someone lives in a TIF district, whether it's owner-occupied or whether it's rental, that it should be held to an affordable housing standard. Thank you all for your work.
All right, thank you, Mr. Moons. We do have one other hand, that's Wendy Dunnington. And Wendy, thank you for sticking around, and we would take your comments now on affordable housing.
Hi, thank you. I am really happy to see Arlington Heights working on this policy. Thank you for all of the hard work. And I just want to echo what everybody here is saying and ask that you do approve a 10% affordable housing inclusion rate. I think that will make us a leader in this community in the northwest suburbs. Thank you,
Wendy. And next is Jerry Wasserman. Jerry.
Yes, I echo everybody that that we are so thankful that we are doing an ordinance here in Arlington Heights, and we appreciate all the hard work that has gone into the research. I do have a question regarding developers walking away. Do we have any evidence that developers have walked away in other communities that have ordinances? And if I'd like to see that evidence, if there is any, I can't find any. It seems like, Highland Park and all these other communities are doing very well, attracting developers, and have had great success, even with with their ordinance. So I don't know if that's a valid talking point, but if someone has some proof to show me, I'd like to see it. From a community standpoint, because we've heard a lot about the developer standpoint, our goal here is to get as many affordable units as we can in Arlington Heights. I feel with COVID, we were already at, I'm sure, what was the number, 25 to 30% of people in Arlington Heights meet the affordability requirement of 30% of their income being spent on housing. And now with COVID and everybody losing their jobs, and that number has to have increased greatly. And the goal here is to provide as many units as we can in town. And just as everybody else has said, I'd love to see the required amount of units at 10%, and increases in fees in lieu wherever we can. I'd like the tear down, as has been brought up. I'd like the tear down to be looked at and increase the fees if all possible, because once again, our goal, if we want to create affordability in housing in Arlington Heights, that's another important aspect. And I just feel like right now, Arlington Heights does have a great opportunity. You are a large suburb. A lot of people look to you as a leader in so many ways. This is a really good opportunity to show that you are really looking to be more inclusive and really making a strong statement of inclusivity and showing that, affordable housing is a priority in your suburb. And the 10% I'd like to see, downtown and outside of downtown would be great to see that increase to 10%. As we know, other suburbs are at least at 10%. And so this is the weakest of the ordinances out there. So it would be nice to increase that amount and stand with where the other ordinances are at. All right, thank you.
All right, thanks a lot. Just in response to that, I mean, as the village manager said in his introductory comments, there are actually very few ordinances that are in any Chicagoland community that are similar to what we're proposing here this evening. And so I do appreciate the fact that you recognize we're being a leader in this regard, but there are not many ordinances, perhaps less than 5. And I don't know what the exact number is, Charles or Randy, but there are very few municipalities that have actually enacted an ordinance for affordable housing. And so we are certainly being a leader in that regard. And that's why we've spent so much time on this effort. So we'll go back. I see no other hands from members of the audience. And so we'll go back to the board for further discussion or a motion. Trustee Scaletta.
I just had a quick question there. Is Northbrook one of those towns that's on the list?
Well, can you, Charles or Randy, can you give us what other municipalities actually have an ordinance? I know Evanston is one.
So the communities that have ordinances is Highland Park, Evanston, Lake Forest, Oak Park adopted theirs, I believe, last year, St. Charles, Crystal Lake, theirs is voluntary. And then Arlington Heights as is a guideline right now. And obviously the city of Chicago. I also wanted to just add, we have had 2 developers that have walked from conceptual projects in Arlington Heights over the affordable housing. One was the Boulevard at South Arlington Heights Road and Seegers Road. They did go to Design Commission. One of their main concerns was the affordable housing. And then we had a conceptual plan for 228 units on the Mole and Motors site off Northwest Highway. They cited concern about market absorption of other projects in the area, not just Arlington Heights, and also affordable housing. So we've tried to kind of weave an ordinance that we know we've implemented some parts of it with Arlington Downs and Arlington 425. We know it doesn't go as far as some people would like. We also know it probably goes further than some developers would like. So we're trying to kind of walk that line to come up with an implementable ordinance that won't kind of scare development away, will still allow the ability to get affordable units in Arlington Heights and also the ability to capture some fees that can go into the trust fund that can then leverage other funds for public developments or nonprofit developments and things of that nature.
Thank you, Charles. Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. So I completely agree with what Charles just said, and I was going to raise the same point to the extent that I think, I appreciate all the work that everyone's done on this, but I still think we have to be cognizant of bringing the developers to the table and not having them walk and balk at the restrictions that we're putting on them with this ordinance. And so that's why I think we need some flexibility and some ability to adapt to some of these maybe changes in the fees, in order to keep the developers here, because we certainly don't want to lose the developers. And as Charles pointed out earlier, you can see the economic effect of having multiple units off the rent rolls at full rate versus a reduced rate, and how much the impact is. And I know a lot of people think that's not a big deal, but it really is. And especially when it comes down to the financial side, and lenders looking at that is how much revenue can be brought in, and what is the affordability to finance this at rates that are out there. So I think all that has to be taken into account. And I'm also curious to see what the result will be as far as where these funds will be put to use and how they'll be put to use. And so, I'd like to see the further development of some kind of committee or some kind of oversight over the trust fund as to what kind of use these funds have. So thank you.
Any further questions? Mr. Recklaus.
I was just going to address Trustee Rosenberg's comment that the determination of how these funds will be used is absolutely something that will be discussed in the relative near term and coming before the board. We wanted to get past this aspect of the discussion first, and that's obviously something we're going to have to tackle, especially as we start collecting more and more money into this fund, because obviously we want to do something meaningful with those funds for the community, and there's a couple of different avenues we can go, and so that'll be coming in the relative near term as well.
Trustee Padovani.
Thank you, Mayor. I also want to echo Trustee Rosenberg's comments about what we might do with these funds in the future. It would be really interesting. It'll be a real opportunity for our community. But I also would like to say that as I've read this, as I've thought about all the different variables, the current proposed ordinance is a good starting point. And I do agree with Charles and with Randy on we should then be monitoring the environment, the market, what the developers do, what the people of Arlington Heights do, so that we can adjust it in the future. I don't see it as solid, set in stone, as much as a good starting point for our community. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that, Trustee Padovani. I think there are a lot of numbers here. It's very difficult to determine exactly what the right numbers are at this time, and that's subject to debate. But I think, as Trustee Padovani just indicated, it's a very good starting point that we can jump off from and see what the impact is on everyone impacted by this particular ordinance. And so always subject to change, as our ordinances are, based on the current conditions. So any other questions or comments? Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. I also agree with Trustee Padovani on that this is a starting point, and it's a very good starting point, even if it's not a perfect starting point. So I think that we need to see how things go. I just wanted to clarify my understanding for section 7-1707 on the number of units. So for all zoning districts other than B5, where we have a 5% requirement, if the developer cannot provide 5% of units, they have to provide their fee in lieu of based on 10% of units. Is that correct? I understand that correctly?
Yes, that's correct, Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you. And so that will help, at least help us build the trust fund more quickly. And again, we, as others have said, the need for further discussion that Mr. Recklaus has said is coming soon. And I also have a question, Charles, about the development on Hickory. Didn't they agree to some affordable units?
That's correct. The first phase did include $25,000 fee in lieu of providing units. And then at that meeting and subsequently, the board made it clear that wanted to start seeing actual units in the development. So they were looking at a next phase building next to that, just to the west, and they were going to include units, and their initial proposal was to include units in that development. And I think they were at about 7.5% of units as affordable. We were asking them to go up to 10% because that is in a tax increment financing district. They have not moved forward with their plans for that project at this point. And the 4 North Hickory that was approved by the board, they have submitted a request for a 12-month extension due to COVID-19 and other situations. So that'll be on the board agenda at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Okay. Mr. Recklouse, in terms of where we go from here, I see the recommendation was looking for feedback, direction, and any recommended changes. And so where are we at with respect to a motion or final approval?
At this point, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Perkins. I mean, I think we would be, be looking for a motion to, recommend approval of an ordinance, correct, or putting it forward for final approval at a later meeting. How would you characterize that?
Yes, I think we'd be looking for a recommendation from the board on the proposed final draft ordinance. I would look to in-house counsel as to whether the board could, adopt the ordinance tonight or whether it would be placed on the next meeting.
I would, the board should have a motion to recommend that the ordinance be adopted, and then we'll put it on the next meeting as an ordinance.
Yeah, I agree. Trustee Baldino.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for allowing me to speak again. I agree with many of the comments. I mean, it's clear in my mind that I have some concerns about this ordinance, but I think it is mission critical that we do get the ordinance on the books. And so I would make a motion to recommend that this motion becomes before the board.
Second.
A motion by Trustee Baldino, seconded by Trustee Canty. Further questions or comments from the board? Well, let me just say thank you to all those involved in this very worthwhile effort, from Nora Boyer in particular for all her great work as our designated housing planner. Nora, thank you so much for all your great work. The Housing Commission for their many meetings on this. I know it's a very, very difficult issue. Lots of numbers. I'm glad you were discussing this in detail rather than me. And so thank you for your great work on this, the Housing Commission. Thank you for the audience for all their input through the public comment process. As some have already said, including members of the audience, Arlington Heights has really taken a leadership position in affordable housing for many years in terms of our guidelines. And I think this is just another step in terms of codifying our affordable housing policies and programs. As we've indicated, very few communities in the Chicagoland area have done this. And so I think this is another step that we're taking here this evening to make our community even more welcoming to any and all who would like to live here. And so hopefully we've eliminated at least some obstacles for some who may want to live in Arlington Heights as a result of our efforts here this evening. And so we again thank you all for your contributions to this effort. And if no further questions or comments from the board, we have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee Canty?
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
Trustee Padovani?
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. All right, thank you all. We have one other new business or old business item to report out tonight. That's the report from the Committee of the Whole meeting from July 13, 2020 regarding adult use cannabis. And so I would call on Trustee Baldino.
Thank you, Mayor. I would move, as I did last week, to direct staff to develop what was then known as option 4, which is to work with the existing medical marijuana dispensary to allow recreational sales exclusively at its location for some period of time.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Baldino, seconded by Trustee Canty. Questions or comments from the board? or from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
President Hayes.
No, with comment, and I don't want to reopen a can of worms, but I would just say for the record, since this is a new meeting, that my comments in opposition to this motion and the sales of recreational marijuana in Arlington Heights were clearly stated last November and also at our meeting last week. And so those comments are in the record. I won't restate them here this evening. But Mr. Recklouse, will you just give us a roadmap in terms of where we go from here with respect to this motion?
Absolutely, Mayor. Staff is met and discussed this issue since last week and have developed a list of issues that need to be addressed and questions that we have for the existing operator, existing medical dispensary. We've corresponded with them on these issues and are in the process of setting up a meeting time to go through them. We would be developing an ordinance that would allow us to enter into kind of a pilot program for adult use cannabis at that location only. We're going to be trying to address all of the issues identified by the board as part of that ordinance. And so, we're hoping to be able to be in a position to put this before the board in late August or early September for further discussion and a vote.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Recklouse. All right, we did vote on this issue, so we'll move on then to new business. There is none. We will then go to the report of the village manager, Mr. Recklouse.
As we discussed under the public hearing, this item is the actual vote for the consolidated plan as discussed, and including any amendments made during the public hearing. And the board can obviously make a motion at this time to amend the plan as we discussed, but we do have to approve some budget this evening due to the deadlines with the county and with HUD.
All right, any further discussion on this issue? Is there a recommended motion somewhere, Randy? I don't know if I'm seeing it.
Yes, it's recommended that we're requesting that the 2020 to 2024 consolidated plan, including the 2020 action plan and CDBG budget, be adopted, and including any amendments made during the public hearing.
All right, is there a motion to that effect? Trustee Scaletta?
Would move as Mr. Recklouse just laid it out.
All right, is there a second? Motion by Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee Canty. Any further questions or comments from the board or from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Again, Nora, thank you for all your great work in this effort as well. We would continue then with Mr. Recklouse's report.
Nothing further in terms of my report, just the item under petitions and communications.
Okay, anything under petitions and communications from the village board?
I would request for a closed session, make a request for closed session per ILCS 120/2C21, discussion of minutes lawfully closed, whether for the purposes of approval of the minutes or the semi-annual review of the minutes, and 5 ILCS 120/2C11, litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the village has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the board finds that an action is probable or imminent.
Can I have such a motion?
Moved.
So moved.
Trustee Padovani, seconded by Trustee Scaletta. Roll call.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes, so we are adjourned into closed session and we will not be reporting back out. Thank you for joining us this evening. Still before 9 o'clock, so enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you all.